Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, October 25th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will now take roll. Director Hassai? Here. Vice President Natoli? Here. Director Welsh?
Here.
And Director Deppie?
Here.
We will now take comments on, public comments on the closed session. Seeing as there are none, we will now adjourn to closed session. Good evening. I think we're going to begin. Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, October 25th, 2018 meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District Board of Directors.
Come on, folks, settle down, please.
I am Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll. Director Hassai? Here. Vice President Natoli? Here. Director Welsh?
Here.
And Director Deppie?
Here.
Good evening. We're also joined by General Counsel Ann Danforth and our General Manager Tony Constantoros. Thank you all for being here. We have returned from closed session. We have nothing to report out, and we gave direction to our labor negotiators. It is now time for public comments for items not appearing on the agenda. If anyone would like to approach the podium. Seeing as there are no public comments? Okay. Well, you have to be quick on the mark.
Cyrus Modavi. I just wanted to raise a concern regarding the fact that I noticed the hazard mitigation plan isn't even agendized to in any form be discussed or brought up this meeting, especially given the deadline that I've heard that time is ticking on this, and it really feels as if the board is kicking the can down the road to the last minute on dealing with this issue.
It will be agendized for November 15th, excuse me, November 15th.
That's good. You know, better late than never.
Good evening. I'm sorry I was slow getting up here. I almost missed. I want to talk about Kensington, California information. I know if you read it all the way and if you're informed, you understand that it's nothing but an opinion of either a person or a group. And there are a number of things in there that I find sort of objectionable, even during times of election. One of the things is that people who put this together, they evaluated the 6 candidates. And there are 3 candidates.
Carl, I'm sorry, could you show us what in reference you're referring to? Is it something?
This is not a matter of jurisdiction for our board or our committee, so we cannot take public comment on items that we don't have, that are not in our purview.
And we do have to be tricky about election items.
Okay, but if you look at it, it says Kensington, California, local governments information.
Well, that may be a misnomer, but it's not anything related to this board or the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District.
So just to clarify, this is a document that, where'd you get it?
It's on the internet.
Just on the internet, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not next door Kensington. It's Kensington, California, local governance information. Now that implies.
It may, but it is not, internet domain names, unfortunately, can be purchased by, I can purchase hughhefner.com and then.
I don't think so. I think that's taken.
It might be now, but, there are different, sorry, bad example, but there are different, there people who have no connection or reason to have domain names in some regards will purchase or have a domain name. So perhaps Ann would like to speak to this.
I would say only that it may or may not be something that the board could take action on. I would rather doubt it, but if you'd like to give me a copy of it, I'd be happy to have a look and bring it back to the board if I think there's something they can and should do about it.
I'm disappointed.
Good evening, Jim Watt. On the 10th of this month, I sent a letter to all of you, including the general manager, requesting that you put on tonight's agenda, or the next agenda, a decision on whether or not you wish to reduce the current unfunded liability, which we pay out over 30 years, down to 15 years.
Jim, this is going to be discussed at the next finance meeting on November 1st, which is why it's not on our agenda this evening.
I don't know that it necessarily has to go to finance first, because what I want to just remind everybody of is that in your policy manual, there is a policy manual number 50/2020, which says that any member of the public may request that a matter directly related to district business be placed on the agenda of a regularly scheduled meeting for the board of directors, subject to the following conditions, and it goes through those conditions. I believe that this item, while it might be nice to talk about it again at the finance meeting, is an issue which I think is critically important, and I think that this is an issue that ultimately has to be decided by the board. So my only comment here, we can delay it until perhaps the next meeting, is that this letter that I sent come before you, and you decide whether or not you wish to reduce the payout for our unfunded liability of about $3.6 million from a 30-year schedule to a 15-year. And again, I refer you to 50/20.10. So you need to be aware that this is my right to ask this be on the agenda. Thank you.
I just want to say I've run across this issue in some of my work, and it's very scary. I'm not sure what the solution is, but it's very scary in terms of unfunded liabilities for every government in the state.
Thank you.
Thanks for allowing the commentary. I have some questions about the police and parks districts boards and pending negotiation with the fire board about the fire board using a tract of land just across the driveway for the construction of what has been termed a fire-wise demonstration garden. So am I correct that your board essentially owns this land on behalf of our taxpayers?
Yes, we do.
Thanks, Rochelle. And if so, then we can... Oh, thank you, I'm so sorry. If so, then we can presume that you have the right to lease space to entities like the fire board leases you space in the public safety building?
Ann can correct me, but we're not leasing space to anyone. We're doing a joint project with the fire board.
Super. So then that's good. So taking those answers, I'm not sure what you as an entity know about this planned garden, but the public knows very little. Janice Coastal has a plan for it that was drawn up. It's mounted in the firehouse. There's a poster of some plants that are meant to go in the garden. Now, we don't know who developed the plans or whether this went out for bid by the fire board. That's not your affair. We know that an initial allocation of $5,000 2 years ago has somehow blossomed into $58,000 with no end in sight and no budget made public. This is how the current fire board does business, and we hope for more transparency from you. Janice Coastal, the head of the fire board, is asking to commandeer approximately 3,600 square feet of space, larger than most Kensington homes, for a demonstration garden of allegedly fire-wise plants, which was changed from fire-safe. Now, pardon the air quotes, but as a biologist who has done research in fire ecology, I can tell you that no plants are fire-safe, and none are fire-wise when there is a major fire. It's not the kind of plants, because they'll all burn at 1,400-degree fire, such as we suffered in Sonoma last year.
Just a moment, ma'am.
I'm getting there.
Well, I also want to point out that you are a candidate for the fire board, and we do need to be careful about electioneering
But this is your
during public
project,
comments.
and this is your project, and as
It
a
is,
biologist,
and
I'm qualified to talk about this.
Of course, and I want to let you know that the Kensington Update, our second newsletter of the year, had an article about the Firewise Garden, and there are extra copies on the back table, should anyone care to look for it.
Thank you. So let me talk to you as a biologist, tell you it's not the type of plant, but the biomass of the plant and where it is placed, the placement, that determines how sensible your garden is. Placement with respect to homes and other structures you don't want to burn, placement is not considered in this planned garden. The current plan for this project are ignorant of the principles of fire ecology and fire management. It would be far wiser to leave the few strands of grass that are now there on that plot than to populate it with dense, pretty flowers that will burn with a greater biomass when a large conflagration comes through. So the demonstration garden actually demonstrates that it will increase the fuel load in this area, and that is a danger to the parks that you actually commandeer. So I went, starting by telling you how misguided this project is, because I'm concerned about your complicity in it. So let me ask you, you own the land, you want to lease it, how much you going to lease it for or cooperate with it? You're not going to, okay, so.
We're not leasing it.
Okay, good, so you're going to cooperate with this. So that's good. So then you have a question of joint costs. So let's presume the fire board takes on developing and maintaining it.
Taking all costs.
That's super, because that's good, because they have over $900,000 surplus this year they're putting away. So the plans call for plants, walkway benches, signs, deer fence, 300-foot perimeter, okay? Who is going to see to its security? And who is going to be responsible if there's an accident on that property? Is your board going to have to deal with the costs, the liability, the legal costs of negotiating this, given that it's so ill-conceived and we don't understand it very much? So I ask you from your side to put the brakes on this vanity project and not enter into any negotiations until and unless the fire board comes through with complete plans that show the public, if they can, that the planned garden is scientifically sound and has a public education value. They have a responsible and realistic budget that's more than blanket allocation, and that their stewardship of this project would absolutely indemnify you, the Police and Parks Board, for any legal action whatsoever. I doubt they can do this. So as a taxpayer, I ask you as taxpayers and board members to use your authority to put the brakes on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? All right, we'll move on to board and staff comments. Any board member comments? I'm going to announce that next Thursday here, there will be the meeting of the Finance Committee. We're going to be looking at budget review and reserve policy, among other issues. Staff comments? None at this time? All right. Then we're going to move on to item 7, the consent calendar, the minutes of the May 24th, 18 board meeting, the minutes of the August 2nd. August 9th minutes are informational only. There are some copies on the back table. They're on the website, but we will not be voting to accept those or to approve those this evening. It'll be approved at the next meeting. And the minutes of the September 13th board meeting. Any comments or corrections to these items? Any public comments, please?
Anthony Knight. I know that being behind on the minutes has been an ongoing issue, and I'm glad to see that we're catching up, at least on these 4. Are we completely caught up now, or are there ones that are still outstanding?
October 4th is not here, but otherwise we have every other minute set of minutes are on our website.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, I'll make a motion that we accept items A, B, and D on the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. The motion passes, any noes? The motion passes 5-0. General Manager Constantoros will introduce our first item of new business, 8A.
All right, thank you, President Sheriff Swant. This item has been requested by the East Bay Regional Park District to be placed on our agenda. The Park District Board of Directors in June voted to place this Measure FF on the ballot for the November election. And the intent is to extend existing voter-approved funding for regional parks in western Alameda and Contra Costa counties. This measure does not increase the tax rate. And we have two members of the district here to make a brief presentation to the board for your consideration and also for the public. I'd like to introduce Carol Johnston, who is the Assistant General Manager for Public Affairs of the Park District.
Thank you very much, Tony. Excuse me. Yes, my name is Carol Johnson. I'm Assistant General Manager at East Bay Regional Park District. Happy to be here this evening to share some information that is also in your packet. And for those that don't have a full packet, I can make some publications available to you. As Tony said, our Board of Directors in June authorized the initiative that is now called Measure FF to be placed on the November ballot in 11 communities, this being one, in addition to 9 cities and another unincorporated area of El Sobrante. This particular area encompasses about 22 regional parks, including one of your favorites, I'm sure, right behind you, Wildcat Canyon and Tilden Regional Parks. And the measure is about extending an existing parcel tax that you are already paying, or residents are already paying, of $1 a month or $12 per year. That particular parcel tax was called Measure CC. It was enacted by unanimous vote of the people in 2004. It is set to expire in 2020. We are putting the Measure FF ballot initiative on in 2018 so that when 2020 rolls around, we won't have any gap in resources that are attributed to Measure FF that will go to pay for parks and projects in and around this area. Some of those park area projects will include fire prevention and fuels management planning right here within the fuel break area that goes from Wildcat all the way to Chabot. And obviously, we all understand that that is a very important initiative to continue to maintain. We have been thinning trees for many, many years. We have received funds from FEMA to continue to do so, but as we all know, we can continue to have to maintain that particular area. Approximately of the 3,000 acres of that forested area, about 1,000 have already been managed and thinned. So we have some way to go, but Measure FF will assist in that. Other categories that Measure FF will continue to support include habitat restoration projects in a variety of parks, shoreline restoration and protection from sea level rise, as well as decaying infrastructure replacement in parks such as Tilden and Wildcat. The reason that we have Measure FF in what we call a zone area, that would be the 9 cities and 2 unincorporated areas, is because this particular area has the oldest parks in the Park District. They also have the most busiest or the most widely used, and they suffer from increased maintenance-related issues. So tonight, I am sharing Measure FF with you, not to look for an endorsement, because that is not in my bailiwick to do, but is to share with you that we are supported by a variety of other entities, including the Sierra Club and the League of Women Voters throughout the entire East Bay, as well as Alameda County Taxpayers Association and several other highly visible organizations. If approved on November 6th, the $12 a month tax will simply continue. You will see nothing new to your tax bills. There will be no increases. It will just simply continue to be on your bills for an additional 20 years. That is the sunset window. With that in mind, I'd like to finally give some information and hope that some of you have already seen it. I know that our fire chief has met with some Kensington residents because of the concerns about fire danger in the area, in the hills, and hopefully has gained more information about the kind of services that we are providing, the partnerships that we're actually doing with other government agencies to protect your neighborhoods and your livelihoods, homes, and lives. We just recently produced a publication and submitted it, distributed it in approximately 244,000 copies, shall I say, were distributed throughout various newspapers in and around this area. It talks about wildfire season in the East Bay and our partnership with the Hills Emergency Forum and all the ways that the agencies affiliated with the Hills Emergency Forum are protecting your neighborhoods. So I have extra copies if you haven't received that. And then finally, for our fence line neighbors, we sent out 77 copies of this postcard from our fire chief that, again, talks about what we are doing to assist in the protection of your neighborhoods through our wildlife prevention efforts. And if you haven't received one, I'm happy to give you that as well. I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Dave Phelps from the East Bay Regional Park District Police, who's come with me tonight to, well, not to give me security, because I don't need security, right? But to be here in case there's any public safety-oriented questions that you may have. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding Measure CC at this time, Measure FF, excuse me, at this time.
And I apologize, I generally prefer to stand in the back and be able to view the entire room without distraction. So I generally like to stand in the back of the room and observe everything that's going on rather than be focused in a corner here and not be able to see the outdoors. So it was nice back there. But now you have me up here, and if you have any questions about our public safety department, feel free to ask.
No question, but I really appreciate what you guys do. It's from the heart.
Thank you, guys. And I love your city. It's a beautiful place. It's a nice place.
I'll just add one thing having to do with fire safety is that obviously we're all fearful about what has been happening in our state, and we certainly are working very diligently to not allow that to happen in our communities. But our helicopter, we do have 2 helicopters that assist in wildfire suppression, as well as basic surveillance of the parks and whatnot. And to date, we have had an unprecedented number of 120 drops of water on a variety of fires, none of which are immediately in this area, which is good. But we're here to help everybody else, too.
Wonderful, thank you. Linda, if you want to come to the microphone to ask.
My question is, Has there ever been, I know this may sound wild, but has there ever been consideration of what I would call a clear cut on the border, which is the interface between the parkland and inhabited areas? In other words, you go through, determine there's like 50 feet is appropriate, and you just take all the trees out, just for that 50 feet, like a road.
I'll try to answer that. I wish our fire chief was here. As I said, I wish our fire chief was here. What I can say is the Park District is not about clear cutting at all. Thank you. Clear cutting is, for a variety of reasons, not, we believe, in our best interest for suppression and or biodiversity of the flora and fauna. The way that we maintain the 3,000 acres, as I was mentioning, and that would be from Oakland Hills, Anthony Chabot, all the way here to El Sobrante Ridge, is by very specific and coordinated planning and through our wildlife management plan, a very specific thinning program that takes down dead and or hazardous trees, removes the fuels brush from encroaching in and around the trees and up to the crowns. And we believe that that type of maintenance on an ongoing basis is the best protection and what we consider to be our fuel break from the housing developments that are immediately adjacent to the what we call urban interface. For a variety of reasons, I don't think people would like to see clear cut visually. We want to maintain the flora and fauna of the parklands, but we have to do it in a safe way. And so that is essentially how our wildlife management plan has been developed over many, many years and has been implemented over many, many years. And it was a direct result of the 1991 wildfire that occurred, obviously, here in the Berkeley-Oakland Hills. So we're looking not just inward at ourselves, but we coordinate with the best practices that other experts in the field, both environmentally, fire, CAL FIRE, and the likes of that.
So it's a compromise. It's a compromise between...
Please, yes, yes.
So I think what you're saying is that it's a compromise, and the way, rather than just making a bandwidth on the interface between the wildlands and human populated areas, that there's this thinning program with attention to dead trees, underbrush, and that's it.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I wanted to know.
And obviously, eucalyptus, the removal of some eucalyptus is involved in our thinning program, but we don't take all eucalyptus. I mean, there's a lot of debate back and forth whether or not we should take all, we should leave all. There's a variety of points of view. But our best practices that have been reviewed and put together by a mountain of experts who have been involved in fire suppression for years and years, as well as the academics who research climate change and the, all those kind of things, have recommended our actual treatment plan. An example of how well it works can be, I can share, happened last year, about this time last year, that in the Oakland Hills, right, I think it might have been Berkeley, Oakland-Berkeley border, along Grizzly Peak, there was a fire that broke out on UC Berkeley land, and it had not been managed. The vegetation had not been managed. It took off, it was quite hot, it jumped over the road of Grizzly Peak and ended up in Tilden Regional Park. Once it hit Tilden Regional Park, in that particular location, and I believe it was somewhere around the steam trains area, if you know that, We had already looked and thinned and had managed some of that area. The fire significantly slowed down. We were fortunate there weren't any significant winds, but the fire significantly slowed down to the point where the suppression crew on the ground, which included a whole variety of different agencies, Berkeley, Oakland, our department, as well as I think even Contra Costa Fire came over, were able to contain it very quickly, and it did not go any further than that. If that area had not been maintained the way I've described, it is the potential that it could have been a much larger conflagration, and we certainly don't want to see that.
Anthony Knight, I'd like to pick up this topic of a fire break along the backside of Kensington and expand, Linda, on your idea and focus it a little bit. This has been a concern of mine for some time. I ask any of you to walk the school trail, starting at the end of Grizzly Peak to the Kensington School, and look down the canyon at the ocean of underbrush and trees that's down there. It does not take any academics or great studies to imagine if a fire got started down in Wildcat Canyon with the wind blowing to the west, what this would mean for Lake, for the Ridgetop and Lake Street. My own idea is that the school trail ought to be made into a proper fire break that a fire engine could navigate. Grizzly Peak was originally extended in that direction. It was all graded. A small four-wheel drive vehicle could already navigate back through that area with two exceptions. And those are washouts where culverts and road building is needed. I think a little road building is needed along the school trail. I think that's the thinking that we all ought to, the vision that we all need to focus on. I posed this exact thought to the El Cerrito Fire Chief Lance Maples at the last meeting, and I asked him, how about this? Talk me out of this idea of putting a proper fire break along the back there so that an engine could get in and the community could be protected at the back door. And he said, fine idea, Anthony, except the East Bay Park District isn't really a promoter of those kinds of ideas. What their focus is habitat maintenance. You just heard it. They're arguing that there's a balance between habitat maintenance and fire suppression. And I think that balance needs to be rebalanced. I think a better job needs to be done at least along that strip. What bothers me is that the East Bay Parks District has its own fire department. So they have their own agenda on how they think fire suppression ought to work. And it isn't seeing eye to eye with the El Cerrito fire chiefs. So far as I know, the cooperation between the two, it's all behind the scenes. It's not open and at public forums. And if it were, I would stand up and say, hey, you guys, get together and admit that you've got all of this high-risk area back there, and a better job needs to be done. If any of you, want any further information, talk to Sierra Woods and the Wood Elves. They've been working on this for years. This is a real sensitive local issue, and I don't accept the picture that's been painted just now of that. And by the way, I'm very much in favor of FF. I think, I'm not. I sound like I'm on my high horse about FF, but I'm really not. I'm on my high horse about the school trail.
Carol, if folks want to give more input to East Bay Regional Parks, where would they send an email or find the contact link? or a meeting time? How would?
We would be delighted to hear from any and all of you. There's a variety of ways. If you prefer to do it online, you can go on our website, and there is a web link that you can directly access to provide any feedback. In addition to that, we have regular board meetings, as you do, twice a month. Our next board meeting is coming up on Election Day. And finally, I would suggest that as part of the Hills Emergency Forum, which again is a group that has been put together at the, unfortunate fire issue that happened in 1991, the Hills Emergency Forum was formed. We are a significant part of it, as are all of these Hill area response agencies. And they have regular meetings once a month as well, where all the fire chiefs actually come together. That might be your best location to have the discussion. You can find the information on the dates of their meetings, and I'm sorry I don't have it off the top of my head, but you can go to their website, which is Hills Emergency Forum. I don't know if it's a .com or .org, but you'll be able to find it there. And those are public meetings with all fire chiefs in and around the area that we are currently in.
Thank you.
I would like to agree with Anthony Knight. I'm extremely dismayed by this presentation. I do support Measure FF. But I had extensive conversation last week with Keith Gillis, who just retired as Dean of the Forestry School at Berkeley. Been there for many years. He's a state forester. His expertise is exactly this subject. He just gave a lecture out in San Francisco last week. And everything that was just said, he disagrees with as a fire researcher. So I would like to know, please, who are the academic researchers and their affiliations that provide you with support for your policy?
Being that I am not with the fire department, I can share with you where to find that. It would be part of our wildland management plan, which you can find on our website, and it would be under our fire department section. And in that document, there are a number of researchers that have that are attributed in that particular document, and they are noted, their agencies are noted, and some in fact came from UC Berkeley and other institutions like that.
Yeah, well, I will just say that the plants you're trying to protect in Tilden Park are not native. They're all invasives, principal of which is the eucalyptus. There is no conservation reason why to protect these plants. I will say one more thing. In the fires that broke out in Sonoma, in my neighborhoods last year, the only thing that saved that fire from burning the town of Sonoma was that people took their caterpillars and their payloaders and they cut fire breaks.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol Johnson. Thank you, Lieutenant Folks. We really, really appreciate your time and coming to us about Measure FF. If you would like to leave things on the back table, and we'll make sure that their copies are handed out and spread around. So thank you. All right. All right, we move on to item 8B. The public safety building lease. The general manager will introduce this item.
The current lease for the public safety building is set to expire the end of this calendar year, and there is a proposal in your packets to renew the lease for an 18-month period, which will end on June 30th, 2020. There is a small increase of 3.2% in this new lease, which raises the monthly rent from $2,955 to $3,050. So with that, this is presented for the board's consideration and approval.
The Fire Board first suggested the extension of this lease in July. Unfortunately, we've not had time to consider it before this time. There is a 3.2% increase, I have to say, over the life of the lease, I should say, during the last 5 years, from 2013 to 2019. The lease will increase overall 16%. We are well below market value for the amount of space that we occupy in the public safety building, and with the advantage of having both public safety districts together, I suggest the implementation of this lease.
Who goes first, him or me? Who's supposed to go first? I always forget.
Well, we kind of go back and forth.
All right. Well,
We don't want to
Draw straws.
you go first, and I'll come in.
Actually, this goes back to the original lease, the 2017 one. First of all, it would be important for the residents to understand the basis for the amount that they're charging. The discussion that occurred back in 2017 at the Fire Board was that this was essentially a maintenance agreement, and it was the cost of maintaining that building and sharing it with the police district, which is reasonable. I mean, certainly the police district should pay for its share of the maintenance cost. However, if you look at the budget for the fire district, their maintenance costs are about $4,000. So I'm not quite sure how they arrived at roughly $35,000, $36,000 a year, and I'm just wondering if they actually presented to you the basis for that amount. And secondly, I would suggest or argue that commercial rents, comparing it to commercial rents is really not appropriate, because commercial rents are not only for maintenance, but also there's a profit motive involved in that and so forth. So they're incomparable. Government rents, and certainly when I worked for the state, we paid the Department of General Services the rent, and there was no profit motive, and there isn't a profit motive in government. They can't make a profit off of those rents. So to compare it with commercial rates, I don't think is appropriate in this case. So again, I would go back to the question, did the fire district present the basis for this maintenance cost, if you will, to reach the amount that they did? Thank you.
David sort of stole my lines. He looks at the same operating financial statements for the fire board as I do. And I very much agree with what he said, and I object to us paying rent on a building that we own. And just like the last time we talked about it, I'm opposed to us paying for a building that is ours.
Anthony Knight. I'd like to echo the last two speakers, their thoughts entirely. To my knowledge, the Fire Board has not presented a careful analysis of maintenance costs. They haven't defined what a maintenance cost is, as opposed to an improvement cost, as opposed to market value for office space. And I think this is a very sensitive issue, Board, amongst citizens of Kensington. Anybody I talk to privately thinks it's crazy that the police services district ought to be paying the fire district for the rental of this building. You're smiling at me like, oh yes, we've heard this before, and yeah, that's what I'm feeling. It feels patronizing to me. It feels like you're ignoring the public on this. I think this needs to be seriously reviewed. Again, I don't think there ought to be an automatic increase made, and I think the arguments are the same as they ever were. This is a very unpopular issue.
Just so you can hear from somebody new on this issue, I agree with everything that Dave said. I totally understand why you would put a cost of living increase or whatever that was. But the problem is that the $35,000 that you started with is very suspect. It's very weird how that was arrived at. The last time the lease was negotiated, Tony, perhaps you've read the notes and you know the history on it. It was a private negotiation, apparently, between the two board presidents, police and fire. And Rochelle very prudently did the research into what market rate is, although I do agree with Dave that market rate is not really relevant here. I think he made a really good case for that. So anyway, Rochelle led with $26,000. She thought that police board should pay. This is in 2017. And the fire board president just randomly, I guess, proposed $60,000. To me, that's a huge red flag, that this isn't based on expenses, as Dave already said. And I really implore you humbly to not vote on this tonight and to consider what we've all said and the history that I've just described, and take it to heart that people feel really strongly that this, I agree we need to pay something, but you guys need to pay something to them, but I don't think, we're not comfortable with the way it's been negotiated or not, so you get the point. Thanks.
Okay, I need to correct a few assumptions that were made. First of all, in 2017, when I negotiated with President Kosel, well, I guess she was not president of the board, but my bid of $26,000 was based on pricing for modular facilities for the police department, a modular mobile unit that would temporarily house our police department. However, that $26,000 also, of course, offered no parking space, did not offer a platform space, but I was negotiating from that basis. The return bid of $60,000 was based on what commercial rent would be. Now, while I understand your idea that commercial space is not entirely equitable, the problem is we don't have any government buildings other than the public safety building in Kensington. So what we would be looking at was securing commercial property space, which, given the amount of space that we currently use the public safety building, transferred to around $60,000 a year. The basis of this lease is years old. There was a break for 3 years in which the fire board at the time gave temporary relief to this board because we were undergoing some economic difficulties, and that rent was $1 a year for those 3 years. And then we went back to the original terms that were negotiated years ago, and they just did CPI increases from there. Len, would you like to continue?
Yes, how do I say this? I am not criticizing anybody's intentions here at all. I guess what I have a problem with is perspective and appreciation of the big picture. I'm listening to this conversation, and it's like we and they and we and they, and it's like Kensington has this split personality. It's us, right? It's like we're charging ourselves rent. And I just kind of have I've said before, I think that we should be working together on much bigger items like funding the community center within the scope of our respective mandates and our spending authority. This issue to me is just, it's silly. I mean, all the friction we're developing over calculating the rental value and negotiating the rate and all this stuff, is friction. You know, it's wasting our time and our resources, quibbling over how we distribute our own resources among ourselves. So it seems to me that it's a no-brainer. The 3 years we got relief, quote unquote, the big issue there when I negotiated that actually was whether there was some violation of the law, whether it was a gift of public funds for the fire district to do this for us, whether it was exceeding their spending authority. We settled all that issue, and part of the settlement of that issue was noting how much the fire board's activities benefit from being there with the police, having the police come out and assist, often arriving first, securing the scene if that's an issue. So I just think we are not thinking enough about how the two districts can serve one community and not be sparring with each other over what to charge each other for this cost or that. I think it's a tremendous waste of time. We have much more important things to do than quibbling over $36,000 a year in rent. Again, I'm not criticizing anybody's intentions. I think everybody's got a good heart on this and trying to do the right thing. I just think that we're not thinking right about the big picture.
Well, and I do want to clarify that in 2016, the fire board at one time spent $40,000 in maintenance costs to clear up a mold problem in our above our evidence room. So I'm not sure where we're getting figures exactly for maintenance, but there was several years ago, just one time, $40,000. So, further discussion?
I just want to say that, going back to the foundational lease that existed prior to the 3 years of relief, I think actually was just a very prudent course of action, and I've also been part of many organizations, government as well as nonprofit, and private sector, where costs are allocated, by departments, by divisions, by branches. So I don't find this very unusual. It's important to know, what the true cost of providing a service is, and this is part of that cost. And also the idea that I don't find this terribly shocking or outrageous.
Oh, go ahead.
Mabry Benson here. It's kind of interesting that basically the police district doesn't have the money or the intention of paying to replace the public safety building. And it seems to me we do have some obligation to at least pay something towards the ongoing yearly cost of running it.
Yeah, my only response to that, each district should pay according to what the community needs and what the district's budget can bear, with fiscally sound reasoning.
All right, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the public safety building lease.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You got one no on that.
Oh, okay. The motion passes 4-1. We move on to item 8C, the amendment to Building E contract. So this item has come about, KCC, the Kensington Community Council, and the KPPCSD have an agreement about the use of Building E, which is the building just over the rise here in Kensington Park, the L-shaped building that is technically at the end of Windsor Avenue. The Kensington Community Council uses that building, which they use the costs of, or excuse me, they fronted the cost for renovation on, and they use it for after-school programs for children. They need an amendment to the contract for the duration of our construction and renovation on this building because we have certain community groups that would benefit from using that space in the evening. And the current contract that we have with them forbids them from having any groups there in the evening. So my suggestion is that we authorize General Counsel to make an amendment to the Building E contract and execute that change for the duration of our renovation. Any comments?
Got my vote on that one.
Okay, I'll make a motion then, that is a motion, that we authorize Ann Danforth to make an amendment to the Building E contract allowing KCC to use the building during evening time for the duration of the renovation of the Kensington Community Center.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. Okay, item D, an update on tree removal in the park. Vice President Natoli, would you like to present this?
Sure. I'm hoping to have bids in place by our next meeting, but we've met with about 6 or 7 different tree removal companies. There are a couple of trees on the south end of the park. There's a Monterey pine, and it's in pretty bad shape, and it's leaning over the adjacent property. Also, there's unfortunately about 6 to 10 redwoods that apparently have damaged roots as a result of some drainage work that was done. And some are dead, others are dying, and they'll need to be removed. And we also have a fairly large patch of poison oak, as it turns out, in the park. And the size is estimated to be about an acre. And poison oak is going dormant right now, so the next opportunity to bring in the goats is next July. And we will see to that. There's also a couple of problematic limbs in some places, and we have estimates, getting estimates for those too. And hopefully we'll have all that in place by our next meeting on November 15th, excuse me, so that we could look into what we want to do. Thanks.
Thank you for all your work on this issue. You've been really dedicated, and we really appreciate it, yours.
Yeah.
And I know that Chief Hull has also met with the removal experts.
He's met with everyone, including the goat people.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your effort, too. You really do a lot of homework on these difficult issues.
So, and we have a retirement project idea no.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I quit my job about 2 weeks ago. I just sent in a letter saying, today's it, I'm quitting, which came as a surprise, yeah.
Congratulations.
Also, one other thing, I have Lisa Corona to thank for this. We do have some ideas on replacing the 5 public garbage cans on Arlington and Calusa. But in the interim, we found a company that will steam clean the garbage cans. That should take place on Thursday, November 1st. So.
I thought you were going to say goats again.
Yeah, those goats are funny. Ricky told me that apparently they bring in 50 goats because they want the goats to compete. They don't want goats to start eating a couple of leaves and then say, oh, this is fine, and just take a nap. So they bring in 50 really hungry goats to just munch away.
One thing you should note is that there were goats on the school property this summer, and they had some problems with local dogs, and that they didn't last. So that's just something to be really conscious of.
Of course, there's a leash law.
We won't start that, please. Please don't. Item 8E, the general manager will introduce this item.
This item is just an extension of the current interim chief of police. The position currently reports to the general manager. When the contract was initially set up, it was an interim chief of police and general manager, and since then that position has been split separately. The reason for the interim assignment is we are currently reviewing the police department and the future options related to the police department. We have only had the draft report presented to the board. That report has to be finalized and probably will extend into the early part of next calendar year for the board at that time to make a decision on how to proceed. So we just need coverage from the interim chief of police to cover that period of time.
All right, any comments? We do want to point out that the general manager does have the authorization. When he was appointed, he has the ability for staffing to hire and fire. So, all right, well, I'll make a motion that we authorize the general manager to negotiate and execute an extension of the contract with the interim chief of police.
I'll second.
I'm going to finish just for a period of up to 1 year, and that's subject to the discretion of the general manager.
Okay, I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes. The motion passes 5-0. All right, we are unfortunately not, we move on to item 8F. We will not have a quorum of members on November 8th, and so we are going to reschedule our regular meeting to November 15th. So I would like to make a motion that we cancel the regular meeting of the KPPCSD on November 8th.
I'll second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. We will meet again on November 15th.
I was wondering if I could ask Eileen to give us an update on the status of, next meeting, not now, but next meeting on the status of, yeah, please. The compost
Yeah,
issue we've been dealing with.
I'll give an update. It's too late to do anything for July 1st, so it'll be January 1st, so it'll be maybe May 1st. Yeah. Compost.
Compost.
Let's give it again at the next meeting, please. Yeah.
We're now giving teasers at the meeting. Hazard mitigation and compost, November 15th, which will unfortunately also be Director Welsh's last meeting. All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye, the motion passes. Good night. Thank you for coming.